That's too bad. I want to begin the episode with your cat meowing in the background. I think we're going to begin with that. This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, the special year anniversary show. Hey everyone, welcome to this very special anniversary episode of Experts on the Wire. We just completed our first year of being on air, and the day after that, I'm very excited to say we had our best download day ever. That's the day with the most listeners. We had 1,000 plus downloads in one day on March 16th, 2017. So very excited about that. Very excited for what's to come with this show. Now, this audio episode goes along with a companion post, which you can find at evolvingseo.com/61 that will redirect you to that post. That post is going to share all the exact screenshots of our download statistics, how things have gone this year, our production process, our audio production process, and a whole lot more. So make sure to go to evolvingseo.com/61. There's really not a lot of doubling of information between this audio episode and that post, so make sure to check that out. In this episode, I called up Anthony. He works with us here at Evolving SEO, and he and I answered a whole bunch of Twitter questions about this podcast from you, the listener, including how we choose guests, how often I go off script during interviews, and some of our biggest lessons learned and a whole lot more. And I want to take this time just to thank Anthony. So Anthony, if you're listening, you've been a huge part of how we've been able to produce this show. You help so much with the research and the show notes and with ideas and helping me to get the show started. So thank you so much. I also want to thank my wife, Sarah, who really has helped with this show as well. She's been super encouraging. So thank you so much. And I want to thank you, the listener, for tuning in, whether you've been with us for the entire year or you've joined us at some point throughout that year. Thank you so much for joining us and for all the messages I get on Twitter and email and LinkedIn, especially for people saying that they've tried things that we've talked about or guests have talked about on this show and actually seen some results from that. That's super exciting. So thank you so much for tuning in. And with that, let's get to this special episode of Experts in the Wire, our year in review with my guest, Anthony.
Very well.
Cool. Well, thanks for doing a redo on this. I think I personally can do a lot better job. I was like so out of it yesterday yeah.
What can I do for you, Dancher? You want me just to shut up and just hang?
No, I actually want it to be more of a conversation because I felt like I was trying to control the flow of everything yesterday too much because I had a bunch of notes, and I would rather have it be more of a conversation today.
All right, cool.
All right, everyone, we're going to officially begin this special anniversary episode of Experts in the Wire. I have Anthony here with me. Anthony, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Dan.
I wanted just to have some fun and dive into these Twitter questions and use that as a springboard to chat a little bit about our first year podcasting. So there's two Twitter threads that I will link to in the show notes. One I actually began last July when I thought I was initially going to do a little review of how the show is going thus far, and I never wrote anything up. But on July 27th, I posted a tweet and I said, I'm drafting some lessons learned from doing 30 plus podcast episodes so far. Anything you want to know? And we got some questions at that time, and I would love to start by answering those. The first one in the thread comes from Gary Stockton at GSTOCKTON. He wants to know how we choose the podcast guests. What criteria do we have? And then he asks about promotion. But let's start with choosing guests. I guess I'll jump in here and begin to say that initially, Anthony, when we first began the show, I remember we just had some casual chats about it, right? In fact, I think you suggested the very first guest, Marie Haynes, who was on the show. And from there, I just asked people I knew in the SEO industry, AJ Cohn, Brian Dean, Phil Rozak, Jennifer Slegg from the SEM Post. I just started asking people I knew. But then you hit a point where you're going to run out of your contacts. You're going to run out of the people that you know. So one thing that I did is go to speaker lists and comb through the list of people speaking at the current marketing and SEO events that were happening. And, I would click on their bio, I'd go to their Twitter, I'd look at prior interviews they'd given, and I would spend a lot of time looking for people that would make good guests, that have good knowledge to share, good stories to share. And really, I'm looking for somebody that can add very specific, tangible value to the show, value in terms of having experience, or value in terms of having a story of taking something from point A to point B. That's a lot of what I look for. How about you, Anthony? What do you, I remember there was a guest you found by spotting a post on Moz. Do you remember that?
Yes. Carrie Jones, right?
Carrie Jones. What, I remember commenting to you in an email after we did that episode that it was our most popular episode thus far at that time. Do you remember what caught your attention about that post that Fractal posted in Moz, and the show we're referring to is the one where Carrie talks about getting 300 plus linking root domains? What caught your eye about that jumped out to you to make you suggest to bring her onto the show?
I don't think it was anything really specific about the post. It was just really more of a visceral feeling that it seemed really interesting and it was timely. And I've known Carrie for a few years, and I know that she does a good job. And Blue Glass did a good job with public relations and link building. So I knew that her working at Fractal, they do a really good job as well. So I knew she would be interesting for our guests.
Yeah, I've taken that approach with a few guests. Dave Gerhardt from Drift is another example. I didn't know who he was, but I saw an article that he did for Drift, I think it was. And what was the article now? I think he was talking about, how he grew Drift's blog traffic in 1 year with content marketing and SEO. And I wanted to know how he did it, and I wanted to dig in deeper. So that was another way we'll find and choose guests, is by keeping an eye out for the posts that are coming up. Taylor Hakes from Yes Optimist, episode 60. I noticed his post about how he scaled College Raptors traffic in 1 year, and I thought that would make for a great guest. Now, I will say one thing. I get a lot of inbound pitches for podcast guests, especially now that we've been doing this for a year. Anthony, what do you think the percentages of how many of those inbound requests of people pitching me to be a guest on the show, how many of those do you think we accept? What would you guess?
0.
That's actually close. I have accepted a few. It might be more like 2% or 5%. I'm super selective. So I probably get 1 to 5 pitches a week of people wanting to be on the show. And, I could see why. Like, I'd be interested in being on other people's podcasts. It's a great way to gain exposure. But I'm super careful about really choosing guests that really are a great fit and a great match for the show and can bring the listeners value. Anthony, do you want to read the next question in the thread? It's by Tyler Hermanson.
Sure. How long have they taken in terms of prep work relative to other forms of content? So when he says they, I'll assume he means the podcast episodes.
Yeah, Tyler, that's a great question. So often people want to know how long it takes to produce a podcast. Now, this is a interview style podcast, of course. So there's no crazy amounts of editing. Like when you listen to like a Radio Lab, or you listen to even Reply All or the Startup Podcast by Gimlet Media, there is a crazy amount of editing that goes into that. And there is an insane amount of collecting what they call tape. So people actually going out into the field, I'm doing air quotes, and interviewing people and investigating and researching, bringing it all back to the studio, recording more interviews in the studio. It's more like a movie production scale to make something like a Reply All or like a Radio Lab. With that said, though, an interview style show is a fair amount of work, and we can break it down into many pieces, but I would estimate it's probably about 8 to 10 hours per episode total for both of us. So Anthony, I know, like I mentioned earlier, you do the research, you do the show notes, you help with that. How many hours per episode would you estimate that takes you?
I would say researching each guest about an hour to 2 hours. And for the show notes, I listen to the entire show, and then obviously I pause and reflect. Sometimes I go surf, so it helps me do the show notes better. So yeah, all in all, let's say one episode with the research, maybe 4 hours, could be longer.
Yeah, and when I think back to the whole year of producing the podcast, because after all, we are doing a year anniversary special here. I honestly can't say that the process has sped up very much because, I have experience with audio editing. So I was comfortable doing that to begin with. It wasn't like for me, there was a learning curve in figuring out how to like slice the audio and edit it and put the music in. So from that aspect, for me, it hasn't sped up the process throughout the year. In fact, I probably spend more time now than I did early on, digging in with some research, listening to prior shows that the guests have been on to maybe come up with follow-up questions to ask them, or maybe little bite-sized things to ask them that other people have never dug into before. And also, frankly, spending sometimes an hour or two coming up with a great title and a great description and summary of the show. And as some of the listeners might know, I record the interview, but then I go back afterwards and record the introduction. And sometimes I'm spending a good hour coming up with what I want to say. Maybe I'm doing a few different takes. And there's been a few times, I don't know if you know this, Anthony, but the show with Mike King, I think, I had his entire episode ready and uploaded to Libsyn, our host. And then what'll happen is I'll start writing the summary, like the actual text in our WordPress post, and realize that I have a way better story to tell and a way better way to introduce the interview. So I pulled the file down and completely redid my introduction, adding an extra 2 hours of work. But that's just because I want it to be really, really good. I don't know if you know that, but what I've realized now, switching around that process makes a lot more sense. So now what I'll try to do more often is actually write out the text portion of the introduction in the post for the podcast, because that helps me clarify what the story is going to be and the story that I'm going to tell in my verbal introduction in the actual show. So yeah, reversing that process has been super helpful.
What's subjectively, what's your favorite title of the 60 episodes?
That is a really good question. I'm going to give two answers to that. My first answer is because it's not a cop-out, but I will admit that I took a title formula from SumoMe. So SumoMe has a blog post about power words. And I think the post is something like turbocharge your marketing with these power words or power word tips or something like that. And I've always loved that title. And I referenced that post to come up with words or adjectives that I want to use. I took that for episode 57 with Jeff Sauer, and I called it Turbocharge Your SEO with these powerful Google Analytics tips. And that formula just really worked. And I have no shame in just kind of taking it and tweaking it. But another one that I really like is Ross's episode number 54, 7 Steps to Massive Traffic Growth, parentheses, SEO and Content Marketing. And what I like about that, what I think works there is the number 7, as people say, is always super, for some reason that gets attention. I don't know if it's like, have you heard in art, there's the principle of threes, or like the what is that called exactly? I forget the exact name. I apologize, but it's like the something of threes, right? When you do a photograph, you're supposed to position something. I don't know. So like the number 7 feels like that type of thing where it just has this magical sort of like intuitive thing where it feels nice. It's a nice number to have 7 versus 6 or 8. But then it's 7 steps. I think people like that in content. They like an actionable piece of content where they can do step 1, step 2, step 3. In fact, when I taught the course at Conversion XL, that was the number 1 question most people asked for. They said, I want a process. I want a step-by-step process of things I can do. Step 1, step 2, step 3. So putting that in the title, and that's in fact what the content was about, really helped, I think, with that title. And then it's to massive traffic growth, not just traffic growth, but massive. So I think that word was a bit catchy. And then the content of that post actually backs that up. And then parentheses, this is something that I've learned from using the Yo Rocket plugin by Brian Dean. It's actually shown that that titles that use parentheses or brackets get a better click as well. Maybe it's just the cognitive, reducing cognitive friction there by kind of showing one thing and then the parentheses is like a subtext almost. But parentheses SEO and content marketing tells the user what the topics are or what the channels or skills are used to obtain the massive traffic growth. So I really like that one because I think it hits on every point that I always try to hit on with titles. It's got a benefit. It shows the topic. It shows the result. It's got the number 7. That one just really worked, I think.
What was your favorite episode thus far? Who is your favorite child, basically? I'm asking.
Yeah, this is tough to say because you never want to say the favorite because you don't want to exclude other people or make anyone feel bad. But I'm going to twist that a little and go with most memorable.
Okay.
And it's got to be the one with Saul Orwell. And that's for a few reasons. One, because I didn't know him to begin with. He's not a huge name in the marketing or SEO space. So I really didn't know him or have any context on him. And he's such a strong, engaging, compelling, interesting personality. And he and I really just kind of clicked and hit it off. At the moment I hit go on record, like we were just sort of in sync during that interview. And I think those elements kind of definitely made him as a guest very memorable. And it's always great as a host to have a guest on that you don't have to pull their slack, right? Like I could have just let him go the whole hour. He would have just talked the entire time. He would have led the whole thing. He would have told all the stories and like hit every point. So as a host, that makes it a little bit easier. That relieves a little bit of the pressure where in some other instances, and it's okay to get somebody on the show that's not a seasoned speaker because that's a challenge as well. I like the challenge of trying to pull somebody along or trying to level them up as far as them explaining something or digging in deeper or like trying to find the story that they're trying to tell. I like that challenge as a host, but having somebody like Saul on, it was super fun. I mean, the guy likes cookies. He changed his name legally his name is not Saul Orwell, so just a fascinating guy. Let's go to the next tweet. So the next tweet I see here is actually not a question, but it's by a former guest and a very dear colleague of mine in the SEO space, Will Reynolds, the guy that coined the term RCS, and he was on the show a while back. I want to read his comment here because it really means a lot. He said, "You do your homework. I love that about your podcast." And Anthony, I think that speaks to the amount of research we put into the show. That hopefully when all the listeners are listening to the prior catalog of episodes or to the new episodes coming up, they realize that, in my opinion, that's the cornerstone of a strong interview-based podcast. Because we can't edit after. If we interview somebody and it goes terrible, or we don't dig in and we don't get the story and we don't get the details, we can't fix that after. I can do a little bit of editing, but that's why we need to put in our research ahead of time. And actually, Anthony, I wanted to ask you, you do a lot of research in terms of you're finding old posts, you're finding old podcasts, you're finding all these things. Just today, in fact, I interviewed somebody and you found old comments that this guy had left on articles. What are some things that you do in your research? Where do you go to dig up these little quotes and nuggets from guests?
Yeah, man, I get in there. I dig in. A lot of things. Sometimes I'll use all my tweets and then I'll just go off with, finding like, I love, I hate, why, maybe just keywords. If they're like associated to, say, analytics, then maybe I'll see what they're saying about analytics.
That was allmytweets.com for the listeners. That's a tool, right? You plug in somebody's Twitter handle and it gives you all of their tweets up to a certain amount?
Up to a certain amount. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I remember I wrote a post about how that's great for customer service. But yeah, I mean, as far as researching a person, it's great too, because then you have all their tweets. And then, like I said, you could search for things like, that signal maybe emotion. Such as I love, I hate, then that could be interesting. Then maybe, I'll start journeying down that avenue. As far as posts, again, like anything that just pops out at me that I think will be interesting, that I think you can angle as something actionable out of them, something that's timely, something that's not going to be redundant, that they've discussed before, maybe they've discussed it, but maybe not specifically a certain facet.
One thing I find super useful that you do is you bring in little personal interests or things that the guests like into their show. And so, for example, today, the guy I was interviewing, I think he mentioned maybe in his show notes, he likes hiking, he likes music. That's useful to me as an interviewer because oftentimes if I'm starting a cold conversation with somebody that I've never met before, one thing that I'll do is begin that interview trying to establish a rapport or a connection or make them feel kind of comfortable with, like, I'm a brand new person they've never spoken to before, and getting them to kind of feel comfortable and relax a little bit, I think makes for a much better episode. I don't always succeed at that, but I do try to do that most of the time. So your little insights that you add to the research that you do help with that, because now I know how to connect with somebody on a personal level. And I think that helps as well.
Nice.
So we got a question from another Anthony, since this is another Anthony D. Nelson on Twitter. Why don't you read his question?
Okay. Yeah, I know Anthony. I actually interviewed Anthony a few years ago. So Anthony 1 asks, what are your original metrics, KPIs, and have they changed 30 episodes later?
Everyone.
So this was in July. He was asking.
Everyone wants to know about podcasting metrics. So again, I'll remind the people listening, you can go to evolvingseo.com/anniversary. That will redirect to a post where I'm going to put all the metrics from the last year, so you can check that out visually. But I will say the big major metric in podcasting is what's called a download. And a download simply means somebody either downloaded the file to their phone or to their computer from iTunes or from Google Play or from Stitcher, or somebody streamed the episode just from their player and they didn't have to download it. So download's kind of a vague number, but it's the only number we have. It's the only real hard metric we have as a podcaster to know, are people consuming the content? And it's the only even rough measure to get subscription amounts. There's no official subscription metric for a podcaster. Like if you run a YouTube channel, or even if you have SoundCloud or Twitter or like all these social places, you know how many followers you have, how many subscribers you have. You don't know that as a podcaster. So to answer Anthony's question, the original metric was downloads. Now I have this lofty goal where I'm trying to get to 10,000 downloads per episode. That's sort of like your minimum barrier of entry to be a really professional level official podcast to really get people's attention. So we haven't hit that. As you can see, when you go to the post, we're averaging somewhere between 1,200 to maybe 2,000 downloads for new episodes now, which is a great number. I'm super happy with that. And I do hope to continue it to grow. But Anthony, I mean, I'm not thinking of how that's really changed at all since we began. I think because it's really like I said, the only number we have. It can't change. There's no other metric really to look at, unless maybe he's referring to like a business goal coming off the podcast, which we can talk about a little bit more, but that's all we have. We have downloads.
Yeah. I mean, my goals are a little different than yours.
Let's hear them.
Yeah, sure. Mine, I mean, well, so initially I thought it was cool for you to do something like that, because I know that you like that, like that makes you happy, and that kind of that stimulates your mind. So I think like that's good to keep you happy and have you do something that's not totally business-like, so it's kind of gives you a release. Also, public relations wise, I think it's really good to have all these more intimate conversations with people in the industry and all different parts of the industry. I think that keeps you kind of sharp. So, that's good to keep my boss smart and up on his stuff. And it just makes people more aware of evolving SEO, and like branding wise, just our style and how we do things and how you conduct yourself in public.
Yeah.
So those are really all things that I like personally. Business wise, I know those are kind of more things like you're focused on, and I support you with that. But my immediate goals are the ones that I just went over.
Yeah, and the huge thing that comes to mind is, we're not sitting in New York City or San Francisco or even Boston, where I'm 45 minutes outside of Boston. So we're not around marketers, SEOs, if I dare use the word growth hackers or entrepreneurs. We're not around these people. So it gives a great excuse for anybody out there to keep in touch and to talk to people. If you're not just seeing them, I'm not going to conferences every month. So there's no serendipitous like running into people. We have to make that happen. And I think a podcast is a great way to do that. And, something Noah Kagan said to me, he's going to be on the podcast soon, actually. He said one of the reasons he started his podcast was because he was just having conversations with people that he thought should be captured and made available for other people to hear. And I look at it a little bit differently. Like I was finding myself going out of the way of like keeping in touch with Brian Dean and Skyping him every once in a while, or AJ or Will Reynolds. Like I would be talking to these people anyways, but it gives a nice excuse to have a proactive reason for doing that. So I find that to be a huge benefit as well. Ryan in New Zealand in July, he wanted to know if we were ever going to go to a video. So as you may know, this is audio style podcast. We haven't really done any videos. There is one video of me interviewing Brian Dean in person in Providence, Rhode Island. But how do you feel about video, Anthony? I know we've talked about this in the past, and actually, when we were first talking about doing a show, we didn't know it was going to be a podcast. We just knew we were going to do a show, and we talked about the potential of doing video. How do you feel this interview style show would translate into video? Is that something we should consider at some point?
No, I think in 2017, if you're just sitting there interviewing someone and there's not other things going on, like you don't have the Roots playing like intermission and stuff like that. No, I don't think it's entertaining enough.
That's a good idea though. We could get the Roots. I can call up Questlove.
We saw Dan, you bought me tickets to see the Roots and while we were in Chicago.
Yeah, actually, awesome. Yep. The podcast movement conference in Chicago. Everything leads back to podcasting.
No, I don't think it's very, your podcast is more informative. If anything, maybe your supplemental, content would help. Like if you have any charts, stats, resources, the links. But no, video, there's nothing really going on. It's more stale. So I think video is not needed for this type of format.
I agree. And for the listeners, you're going to get teased a little bit more to what the show is all about with Noah Kagan coming up, because this is something I was torn with. So Noah's going to be a guest on the podcast soon. I've already done the interview. And one thing he suggested was that I actually turn the tables on him a little bit and give him some SEO advice on his website, okdork.com. which I did in the interview. But the problem with that is he and I were sharing screens, desktops, during the interview. But as an audio listener, there's no context, there's no visual to go with that. So that's something I was afraid of, and quite transparently just saying that to the listener. So Anthony, you and I have been discussing the possibility of me going in now and making a video after the fact to go along with the audio to help supplement that. And that's a great use case scenario for what you said, is maybe there are some instances where maybe we even take, this is ideation right now, maybe we even take past podcasts or recent episodes, take a 5 or 10 minute snippet of that would benefit adding a visual aid to that and uploading it to YouTube as a 10-minute standalone piece of content. I think it's a great possibility of recycling content and repurposing it. Mm-hmm. I could even make one thing I thought it would show is to make it more like a slide share. So it's tough. It'd be tough to navigate around with a mouse and everything to the audio. It is almost like putting the cart before the horse, but it would be very easy to advance through a slide deck in response to the audio, I think. So that's one option I came up with. Last question on this thread from July. Martin Anderson at Webmaestro. He wants to know, what's the 3 most crucial things that make up a good podcast? So Anthony, I thought it'd be fun actually to split this into 4. You get 2 and I get 2. And if you want a few minutes to think about it, I'll give my 2 first, and then you can come in with 2 things or 1 thing, whatever you want to add to what you think makes up a good podcast. The first thing I already mentioned, which was research in an interview style podcast. So I'm not going to mention that again. I'm not going to double up on that. But my number 1 would be to not follow all the rules or advice that you're given, but to actually try to do something unique and experiment and find your way of doing a podcast. And this could apply to any of the listeners out there doing content, doing video, doing marketing, doing social media, doing guest blogging. You're going to hear so many rules, and you hear so many rules out there. Like, for example, this very well-known podcaster, his name is Cliff Ravenscraft, podcast answer man. He told me, I think it was actually not Cliff. I forget who it was. It was somebody that had been podcasting a long time and is very well known for it, but it was not Cliff. So anyways, back to it. I apologize, but he told me, Dan, you have to tease the next episode by mentioning it at the end of the prior episode. So if I'm on episode 3, you got to tease who's on number 4. You got to say what the topics are. You got to get people interested in going along to the next show. And I said, okay, he's a 10 plus year veteran of podcasting. He must know what he's talking about. That must be a rule that I need to follow. I tried it a bunch of times. I don't know if you heard this, Anthony, like the first 5 or 10 episodes, I was applying this rule that he had given me, and it just didn't feel right. It was like, I've got to figure out what the next show is. I've got to make sure I have it planned. I got to know what the topic is. I got to know what I'm teasing. I got to add it in at the end of the thing, or I got to remember to say it when I'm doing the interview. And it was just a big headache. And I found I prefer to tease the next show by just doing such a quality podcast that episode after episode after episode, people are compelled to want to listen to the next episode because they're getting value. I don't have to use some trick or tease them to get to the next episode. So that's one example. You're going to hear people tell you, you need to write a blog post that's 1,500 words. No, you don't. You can write an amazing blog post that's 300 words. That's super brief and to the point. I love Jason Fried's idea. Like, he wants people in school to write a 1-sentence paper, like a 1-sentence report. Because you're a writer, Anthony. Isn't it much harder to convey something in a shorter space? Right? It's so hard to be concise and to be to the point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's my first rule, really, with anything in marketing or content creation, is don't follow the rules. Second, I would say, second to research, it would really be along the lines of uniqueness again, having your own voice, literally, like sound-wise. And so my microphone is not a typical podcasting microphone. It's a nice microphone, but it's usually more for singers or for music, for musical instruments. But I'm not going out there and buying a fancy $300 podcasting microphone. I'm just going to sound like all the other people podcasting. And plus, I know that I don't have a deep radio voice. And in fact, when I do that, I probably sound kind of silly. So I'm not going to try to talk with a radio announcer voice on the podcast. I want my own voice to come through. And of course, things could always be better with it. I can always practice enunciating or not shouting too loudly or not mumbling my words or whatever. But it's important to me to have a unique voice as well. So I think as a podcaster, because that's the first thing people are going to hear when they tune in, right? Like, I don't know how many podcasts you listen to, Anthony, but like there's so many marketing podcasts out there, and so many of these people are trying to put on this radio voice. And I've been a guest on podcasts. I'm not going to call anybody out here, but I don't know if you know the ones I'm talking about, where like the hosts, they try to like talk like a radio announcer, and they just sound like everybody else. It's like writing like everybody else or doing content the same way as everyone else. You just need to be unique. So I think you need to embrace your own way of talking and your own unique voice. So those are my 2 top lessons learned. There's a lot more. I'm going to put them in the post. But Anthony, did you have a second or two to come up with a couple rules or tips, takeaways that you've learned?
1, you should hire Anthony. 2, but you can't. So we'll have to go to 2. Number 2, I would say be consistent.
Consistent. Do you mean in format, day of the week? Like, do you mean everything?
Consistent. Sure. Optimally, consistent's good. I think to build, an expectation, for your fans. So, yeah, I mean, I think you don't want to make them feel too unsettled or keep them guessing too much. No, consistent day of the week would be great, but if you can't do that, then format, temperament. You know what I mean? Personality.
Topics.
Sure, like for instance, if that's like Howard Stern, for instance, I don't believe that's his real personality, but I mean that's his radio personality, and it works, and he's done it a great job for decades. So yes. I mean,
it's almost like you have to craft a persona for yourself a little bit, and that's a little what I'm referring to about having a voice, not only your speaking voice, but also your overall persona that you have on air.
Yeah. And it also, I think it has to do with the kind of podcast. Your podcast is more objective. It's more fact-based. It's less of a free-flowing conversation. You have more of an agenda, and your listeners have the expectation of getting something actionable that they could do, something tangible, rather than I have this personality on that you know from the movies, that you know from he's an author or she's an author. So, and you kind of just want to glean their personality a little bit.
I think that's such a good point. And it ties in a little what I was saying about not being a radio announcer. Like, I know that sometimes I skip a word or ask a question a little funny, or I'm not like perfect. But if you meet me in person, that's how I'm going to be. So I want that to come out a little bit as well in the show. I think it's an excellent point. So the first question in my Twitter thread from the other day happens at an ironic moment. It is Ross Simmons. He wants to know when the pipes are going to get fixed in my office. And the irony is that the pipes just started clanging right now. I don't know if you can hear them, Anthony.
I hear them.
Yeah. What Ross is referring to, and a lot of the listeners might be aware of, is I'm in a new room in the same building where we have the most ancient heating system. And like multiple times during the day, the pipes just start clanging because it's good to stay warm, but it also doesn't make for a good podcast recording environment. So Ross, I don't think the pipes will ever be fixed, but I do try my best to not, as funny as it is, to not schedule recordings around when I know they usually are clanging away. Or as I was doing with you, Anthony, when you were talking, I'm actually muting my microphone so it doesn't get picked up in your track. So at least it cleans it up a little bit.
Dad, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
You don't think so?
No, I mean, I know Ross is just kidding with you. So I'm not taking his question seriously, but yeah, I don't really think it takes away from, there's really no need for that conversation.
I appreciate that. It's funny, as the show starts to get a little bit more exposure, there's people listening that I think don't even know who I am. Let's say they haven't heard of me. There's no personal connection. And so we got a review the other day in iTunes. The first 4-star review we got, all the others are 5-star. And the guy said, content's great. There's no jargon. It's not, filler. but the audio quality stunk on the last show that you did. And it did. It wasn't that great.
Okay.
But he ended it with a cute little hashtag where he said, "spoiled by NPR?" ? And I think it's interesting because people are starting to expect a higher level of quality from audio content because of the big players out there, the NPRs, Gimlet, the big brands that are getting into podcasting that have the resources. By the way, I want to tell listeners, like, we do this podcast completely self-produced. The only nice thing about it is my microphone, which is not even a podcasting microphone. I'm using a mic cable from 1997 that I used to use in high school. I'm using a mic stand that is literally falling over. I've got a couple other little cheap pieces of equipment, and I edit the entire show and produce the entire show audio-wise by myself on my laptop. So there is nothing expensive equipment-wise about this show, but that's part of me trying to make a point to what you just said. You don't need a $2,000 microphone to make a great podcast. You need good content. You need good guests. You need good questions. Hopefully I ask good questions. So I sort of feel like
we're more punk rock here. Exactly. Our content's good. You know what I mean? We don't need a $1 million production studio.
No. And you're going to see in the post that I've been mentioning and that you can go to at evolvingseo.com. I'm actually going to share screenshots of what the hoops that I jumped through to produce an audio quality on this show that I think is quality enough. Like, you hear other podcasts, like Product Hunt had a podcast for a little while. I don't know if you've listened to it, or maybe the listeners have checked it out. Their audio quality was so bad. Like, people were complaining about episode 60 with Tyler. This was like completely on a level of crappiness that does not even come close to anything we've ever done. All people are just on like laptops with microphones and echoey rooms, and they didn't even, raise the volume level. Like, it's super quiet. So I think people need to understand what they're listening to when they tune into a podcast, that you're mixed in with everyone, right? You're mixed in with NPR. A podcast produced by NPR could be sitting next to one by somebody produced, literally in their garage or something. So we do try to do the best we can with the audio, but I do think it's interesting. Braulio Valenzuela, No Soy Braulio on Twitter, NOSOYBRAULIO. He wants to know, again, somebody else asked, but there's a little twist here. How do we approach someone to be a guest on the podcast? There should be good stories, right? ? So I think what he's asking is like digging in a little bit more. Does the person we bring on the show, do they have to have some good story or anecdotes or things to talk about? And it's an interesting question simply because of the fact that, Anthony, at the beginning when we started the show, I was all into like, let's provide educational content. Let's just teach people. I was like completely not against stories, but I just didn't think of our show as having any element of story in it at all. But in the last 10 to 15 episodes, I found a lot of value of bringing in story elements into an informational show. For example, when I begin Tyler Hakes' interview by asking him, I see you went to school. What did you go to school for? Tell me about that. That's different than saying, well, what's your background? Like, most podcasters begin an interview by going, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your background. And I think that can sometimes lend itself to a boring or non-engaging answer because people just go into their habitual spiel about it. But I found elements of story to be super helpful in making this podcast in the last 10 to 15 episodes. And again, using Tyler's example, he told the story in his post. So he didn't just say, I scaled College Raptor from 0 to 100,000 visits monthly. He said, I was brought into this company. I was terrified. He's like bringing in emotion. He's like he's bringing us to that moment of when he was first sitting at his desk, his first day working for this brand new startup, and he was expected to bring results. And I think that then makes what he's teaching us much more compelling after the fact. How do you feel about that, Anthony? Do you think that there's value in, because I'm afraid that sometimes the story is going to make people impatient or detract from the information. But how do you feel about that? Do you think it actually makes the information more engaging, compelling, memorable? Maybe it makes it more sticky?
It depends. We were talking about this yesterday. The way I look at your show is it's 80% more informative and objective, and it's 20% maybe anything that could be ventured into storytelling element. I mean, storytelling is great, obviously. Who's the comedian that you like? That tells stories. That's more of his.
Man, you have a good memory, because I've only mentioned this to you like once. Mike Birbiglia.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, storytelling is great and it works. Your show, I would say, if you're a great storyteller, that won't necessarily make you a success on your show, and most likely with our listeners. I don't think most people are listening for personality. I think they appreciate it, but they're more interested in why someone is an expert in what they do.
I think people will say that, and they might even believe that themselves, like they want information. But I think, at least for me anyways, I've realized that a lot of the informational content I like to consume does have a little bit element of a story in it. I find for me, and I could just be speaking for myself, it helps capture my attention and makes me interested, versus, unless it's something I just really, really want to learn about. Like analytics, like when Jeff Sauer was on the podcast and he was teaching about those analytics and SEO segments and reporting, like that was great. I don't need a story with that. That was information I wanted to know. But I've been finding I really like, what I like, I guess, Have
you ever asked anyone point blank, why do you like the show?
No. And here's why, because I feel like you're going to get a glossed over PR'd version answer from them. You're not going to get, because I feel, and this might just be me, but content is something you like on an intuitive level. And it's something you feel versus intellectually saying, like if somebody likes music.
If they like it already, it's not like saying, do you like this? And like they might not, and then they have to bullshit you. If they already like it, then asking them why, there should be no sort of pretense or awkwardness about that. They should tell you why.
I don't think it'd be awkward. I could be wrong. I feel like the answer, the reason they would give would be this sort of intellectual thinking of the answer after the feeling type of response versus them really understanding. Like, I'm super self-aware when it comes to things that I know that I like. Like, I can tell you exactly why I like the type of music I like, or the type of comedian I like, or the type of content I like. But I guess I don't give people that credit. I don't give all people that credit of trusting that if they're giving you a reason why they like something, that they really know the real reason. Like if I said to somebody, why do you like this podcast? And they said, well, I like the information, I like the tools, I like the tips, I like the tactics. But what they also really resonated with, but didn't realize it, was a story or was emotion or was something a little beyond just the tools and tactics. And then I remove those elements. Maybe I'm removing something that they unconsciously did like at a certain level, that did make the show more interesting and compelling.
I mean, those are just all, just conversations, assumptions. I don't really know.
Yeah, and I'm being super.
But the format that you've chosen, like I wouldn't have this sort of show that you have. My personality is more, I like to kind of get people's personality out of them and maybe ask more pointed questions, maybe keep them on their toes, but definitely wouldn't be more actionable. Like it would be way more emotional and subjective of a show, philosophical. Your show is definitely more objective, right? It's more intellectual. it's more what you see is what you get. So if people, but then the person themselves, right, is the agent for this knowledge that they have. So I think as humans, sure, we want to also embrace the vehicle, which is the human. We wonder about the human too.
And that's the interesting part for me. And one reason why I've loved doing this podcast so much, especially in the last 15 to 20 episodes, is that challenge or that journey into some unknown land where I'm trying to push the envelope and feel around to see how much can I bring in a story or an emotion.
Can I get meta for a second with you?
Get meta.
In listening to all the podcasts in the last year and in knowing you for the last 4 or 5, I would say that I've kind of seen a bit of an evolution, in like your interest. Maybe it's a level of comfort. Maybe you're more comfortable with speaking to people, but you seem to be more interested in the person part than not just the intellectual. And I don't know if you're doing that for the listeners, but I feel like that's a Dan Shore thing too.
I appreciate that. It's a very astute observation, because internally I can feel that as well. Like if you go back and listen to the first 10, 12, 15, 20 episodes, that's lacking. It's definitely lacking. I think it's one way that the show is improved for sure. And I can't say I know where that came from. It just gradually over those episodes like 20 to like 30, I really began to be interested in pulling out more of the person, of the story, of the emotion for whatever reason. And that, getting back to it, is why I don't want to take that element out of the show. In fact, it's a challenge and it's a fun journey for me, in the same way that being a jazz musician is a fun journey, because it's going into the unknown, right? It's like starting on something you don't know where it's going to end up. You don't know where the line is or where the envelope is. So it's very interesting to see how far I can push bringing in a story or emotion element, but maintain the information, maintain the tips, the tools, the marketing, the tactics. And I think that's the area of opportunity for this sort of informational type of content, is to be mixing those two things together, mixing those two worlds that a lot of times they don't mix very well, or it's not executed very well. And that's super interesting to me. And somebody that's been a huge inspiration to me has been Andrew Warner of Mixergy. I think he does this extremely well with his show. So that's somebody that I've definitely looked up to as far as an interviewer.
Yeah, and let's face it, I'm thinking of a few professors in college. I mean, sometimes the person, the woman, the man just isn't that interesting of a personality, despite their brilliance in a content area.
Yeah, I'm sure there's people we can all think of in our lives that
Sure.
That fit that. Next question is from Glenn Alsa. I don't even know how to say his last name. I'm sorry, Glenn. Viperchill, at Viperchill on Twitter. Pretty well known in the SEO space for, coming up with niche sites. And he's got his new site, gaps.com, where he's talking about, no irony intended, marketing stories and things along those lines. But he wants to know, what's your goal besides helping people with SEO? Is it brand recognition or client acquisition? And we talked about this a little bit before. And actually, I don't even know, if I'm being truly honest, I do enjoy helping people with SEO. But what I enjoy even more is when people write back into us and they say, this is a real example. I applied Sujan Patel's lessons from his episode and I saw results in my marketing and in my business. I love when people are actually applying the things that they learn about. Because sure, you can listen to it and you can be a little maybe entertained, or you can get some intellectual value out of it. But to me, helping is people actually going and applying that stuff and then that making a difference. Second to that, people have actually met and been introduced to one another by being on this podcast or listening to the podcast. So people have, I've seen people interacting with guests on Twitter. I've introduced people to one another. So that part of it's really fun as well, just being able to introduce people and network. He wants to know what other goals are. And I actually have 2 goals of mine. And maybe you could speak to any that you might have, Anthony. But one of my huge goals is to do more speaking. As I'm sure you can tell, and maybe some of the listeners can tell, and this is part of the musician in me, but I love being on stage. I love being in front of people. I love sort of that give and take between the person on stage and the audience. It's just to me, a lot of people are afraid of speaking, but it's a very comfortable place for me to be on stage. So I would love for podcasting to lead to more eventually speaking opportunities or opportunities to be in front of people. That's just a very fulfilling thing for me personally. And then second is I just want to do more interviewing. I mean, we've been talking about interviewing and you can probably tell how excited I am about it. I like what we're doing right now. I liked what I did earlier today with Liston, who I interviewed, and it's going to be on the show soon. I like that actual moment. And it's like being a musician, like being in that moment of actually doing the interview or having the conversation, like the tape's rolling, anything can happen. Like you don't know what the person's going to say next, and it's being captured and it's going to be, kind of living on forever now. That to me is really the most fulfilling, or one of the most fulfilling parts about podcasting. And that's why I just want to be able to do more of it. So the more successful the show gets, and maybe we don't make money from the show right now, but if we do in the future and the show is actually supporting us in a monetary way, the more I'll be able to do this, the more I could, we could maybe go back to doing 2 shows a week, or like I mentioned to you yesterday, we could bring the show on a live stage somewhere and do it in front of like a live audience. So the show being more successful lends to that, more of that happening. And that's not a business goal. It's a personal goal because I get enjoyment out of it. So Anthony, I don't know if you have any particular goals or things you would like to see happen as a result of the podcast. Does anything come to mind for you?
No, I mean, we kind of already discussed it. So I said, like happy wife, happy life. So happy boss. You get to go surfing. No, I mean, goals. No, I mean, you know what? I personally really like that comment by Will Reynolds. Because for me, that showed that what I'm putting in personally is being appreciated, and I know you appreciate it. So just more stuff like that, just proof that I'm doing a good job on my side. So
yeah,
those are my goals. That's it.
It's nice to do something that matters to people, that people notice. That
Absolutely.
And you have a genuine desire to be helpful, not doing it to make money or something. Okay, so moving along, we've got a few more Twitter questions here before we wrap things up. Gaetano, who's at Gaetano_NYC on Twitter, that's GAETANO_NYC. And I know he's been a fan of the show. So thank you, Gaetano, for all the support and everything. He wants to know what we do different. What would we do differently? What would we keep the same? What have you learned? So he's kind of digging in for a little bit of lessons learned. What would we do differently? I can definitely highlight one mistake that I made at the beginning is I started too broad in terms of topic. I was thinking this would be a overall digital marketing show. And I think that was just me being fearful that we would run out of things to talk about in the SEO world or the inbound marketing world, or just fearful that it would become not interesting to people maybe after a little while. But in fact, we've noticed the opposite. We've noticed the more we focus on SEO or link building or getting like John Mueller from Google or talking about, content marketing in relation to SEO, the more excitement there is for the show, which is interesting because I thought we needed to cover a broader range of topics to make the show successful and last, beyond just a few episodes. But there's a lot to SEO once you start digging in. A ton. So that's one mistake I can think of. Anthony, do you want to read the question from Amanda Milligan?
Sure. I'd love to hear about how often you stick to the script, questions versus how often things take their own course.
Yeah, Amanda, thank you for the question. By the way, she's at Fractal, which you pointed out to me yesterday. So she works with Carrie. She's at MILLANDA on Twitter. I think we were hinting at this a little bit earlier, Anthony. Let me ask you, Anthony, because you see the questions and you come up with things ahead of time. How often do you notice that during the interview, things are sticking kind of to the script or to the topics that we intended to talk about versus going off in their own direction?
Well, there's a layer of me being in the dark because I don't know what questions you've prepared for yourself before
right.
the actual interview, but just based on intuition, percentage, or how often. We kind of talked about this the other day. I don't know if I don't think it's your agenda. I think sometimes you feel like it's your responsibility to follow up on something maybe that when you think you've struck a chord.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear your insight there because as I was asking you, I realized that you wouldn't know because there is a layer of me going and adding some additional questions. As a listener, do you get the sense that that's happening? I'm curious, and you may have just sort of said that a second ago. So you're getting the sense that things are sometimes going off of the script. And then I'll give the answer.
More so that perhaps you didn't have this question planned, but based on what the guest had said, now you're exploring further.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to echo that, you're right on the money. So I don't find myself necessarily going off into topics I didn't expect. So if somebody's talking about CRO and then we find ourselves in analytics, like that's not happening much. But what you said, and I think one of the biggest skills as an interviewer is the follow-up. So you ask a question, somebody says something, they say this one little thing and that they seem to just skip right over in their sentence. However, it really jumps out to me in a way where I'm saying, if I was the listener listening to that show, I would want the interviewer to like say, wait a second, stop and ask the person, like, what was that like weird thing you just said that you skipped over? I want to learn more about that. And
yeah. And as your personality, I think you're kind of good at keeping people on course, but without being impolite. Like you do it to me a lot. Like, you don't let me like float off into space.
Do you know what that comes from? It comes from 10 plus years of teaching little kids piano lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could see that you do. You rein me in very well.
And I'm not referring to you as a little kid. Anyone in general that I'm keeping on course is what the connection was there.
No, good. No, you're good at it. And like I said, it doesn't come across as impolite or like strict or anything. But it's good. It's subtle, but it's good. It's happening. It's happening if you're aware. But it's good.
So Jared Gardner, I just want to call out Jared and say thank you for asking a question. We've sort of already answered it. He wants to know what we would do differently. But if you want to say hi to Jared, he's Dig a Gardner on Twitter. I like your Twitter handle there, Jared. We have 2 more questions, and then we're going to wrap things up again. People can go to the post and check out all the stats and all the details and everything. Sandra Prue Rand, she's at Sandra_Rand on Twitter. She wanted to know, how long does it take to get traction? What are you planning to do more of, less of? I want to dig into the first one a little bit because we haven't quite talked much about promotion. A lot of the questions were around how we promote the show, how we get the word out there. And it's an interesting question because quite honestly and transparently with listeners, it hasn't been a super proactive area for us. Definitely not in the first 9 months. I've been doing a little bit more, which I can speak to promote the show. But what I would say, the things that we've noticed being effective with promotion that we have done, besides just me tweeting the episode, right? I mean, I don't even count that as promotion. And this speaks to today. I think we're getting that huge spike today in downloads because we have not 1, but 2 episodes that are on page 1 and 2 of growthhackers.com. And that's one of the biggest growth areas that I've noticed for podcasting is being present in relevant communities where people are looking for this type of content. So within Product Hunt, you can actually hit play and listen to the episode right within Product Hunt without having to leave. And that's huge because that counts for a download and it reduces the friction that you have to do to click to go to the website. And then if they don't want to hit play on the browser, they don't have to go to iTunes. It's just right there within Product Hunt. But then being on inbound.org and Growth Hackers, growth hackers, especially, I've noticed that giving the most exposure, I think, to the show out of all three of those. The second thing, every big podcaster says that their biggest promotion channel is to be on other podcasts. So when Radiolab first came out, they didn't have any listeners. They were featured on This American Life many times, or at least one time, but I think many times. That 10x'd their audience overnight. And then 99% Invisible was on Radiolab. After Radiolab was huge, that 10x'd their audience overnight. So what I'm trying to do a little bit more of is be a guest on other people's podcasts. I was on Edge of the Web recently. I'm going to be on Entrepreneur on Fire. I would love to be a guest on Mixergy someday. So that's one thing we're trying to do more of. And we were talking about this, I think a week or two ago, Anthony, is like, what are steps that we can take regularly for me to try to be a guest on other podcasts? But other than those two things, Anthony, the communities and being a guest on other shows, is there anything else you can think of that we've experimented with or tried or that's given a little bit of a boost to the show?
I was doing the Facebook ads for a little bit, but not with great success.
Here's the thing, to your credit, it's tough to track. Getting back to the podcasting metrics earlier, we're tracking downloads. That's our metric. It's really tough to connect the dots between a Facebook ad, then somebody landing on your website, and then that converting into a download. If anybody out there has a better way to track this, I mean, I'd be all ears, but that's tough too, because a lot of people, like I said, they want to listen to a podcast on their iPhone, not on a website. So many Facebook ads will drive people to the website. We may have experimented once or twice driving somebody to iTunes. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember if we did that.
But that's difficult because we have no metrics. We have no analytics for iTunes traffic. If somebody lands on iTunes, we don't know about it unless they hit download, unless they hit play or they download the episode. It's not like our website where we send traffic to our website and we have Google Analytics to track traffic. So there's no connecting the dots between an ad that goes to an iTunes link and then people listening. I think the only way to measure that is to take an older episode that's not getting a lot of downloads, crank up the ads, and see if that spikes the amount of downloads on that episode.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, have you clicked on any ads on Facebook? Well, you don't use Facebook.
Yeah, I don't use Facebook.
You click on what makes you click on the link on Twitter because of who you see shared it, or do any pictures ever make you look more than others, or what?
Absolutely. If it's a topic I'm super interested in, or a person, or the context of it, who shared it is also a big part of it.
Because my issue was, if you can remember, is I just thought, well, I wanted to do something more than just dry, hey, this is a podcast about SEO. So I took the humor route, and it was got a little blip on the screen a couple times, but like I said, nothing with huge success.
The last thing I'll add is LinkedIn. Organic LinkedIn posting has actually been getting traction as well lately. I've noticed that if I post the episode on LinkedIn, I write a unique description. And by the way, when I post everything in Growth Hackers or Inbound or Product Hunt, I'm taking the time to write a specific description and title for that audience. So when I do that in LinkedIn, if that LinkedIn post gets even a handful of share or likes or comments or shares, that exposes that to people in my second and third degree networks. And you can actually see in LinkedIn how many people look at your posts. And some of them have been over 100 people that have looked at, just a simple LinkedIn post. And those are highly, more focused impressions versus like a tweet. So LinkedIn's been interesting. And I think one thing maybe we could experiment with more is for the longest time now, I've been talking about it. I want to write content in LinkedIn on LinkedIn Pulse. And I've heard that's a great way to drive extra exposure just through LinkedIn. All right, so I think we have one last question here. It's from Orlando SEO Group. I think it's a little similar.
I used to live near Orlando.
I know you did, down in sunny Florida. He wanted to know, or he or she, I shouldn't assume it's a he. They wanted to know how we promote the show. We already answered that. Where most of the listeners are coming from, where we host the podcast, iTunes, etc. So listeners, I think we kind of already spoke to this. They're coming from either my existing network or people discovering the content in these platforms. I will add something though. We've had no help from iTunes. There are some crappy iTunes podcasts ranking very high about marketing and about business that are terrible because you can still game the system very easily in iTunes by hiring some people on Fiverr or Mechanical Turk and spiking up your reviews and artificial subscriptions.
iTunes tapped our phones too.
iTunes what?
No, I'm being funny.
You're being funny. Oh, can you hear my phone ringing? This proves we don't edit, right? Okay, I'll silence that. So just to wrap that up a little bit, a lot of people grow their podcast by launching it and appearing in New and Noteworthy right away. And that gives them the immediate traction to get a huge amount of traffic and downloads and subscribers right at the beginning. I actually kind of didn't want that to happen in a way. I felt like we needed the first 6 months or so to, at least me, to really figure out what I was doing and become a better interviewer and run a better show. So I'm very happy with the slow growth, with being patient and thinking of this as like, a 5-year growth process over, let's just game iTunes and show up, in New and Noteworthy and then trick people. I'm definitely not into the tricking people. We did get a little bit of our exposure in player.fm. They've been ranking us on their marketing page, I believe, which is similar to showing up in top podcasts in iTunes, but obviously they don't have nearly as many users as iTunes that I'm aware of. And then lastly, Orlando SEO Group, they just want to know where we host the podcast. So the way it works is you upload all the files to our host, which is called Libsyn, which stands for Liberated Syndication, libsyn.com. That's where all the statistic screenshots are from that you're going to see in the post. And from there, that one audio file becomes the audio file that you hear in iTunes, that you hear in player.fm, that you hear in Stitcher. They're all calling back to the same MP3 file from the one host location. So iTunes, a lot of people don't realize this, iTunes does not actually host your podcast. They're just simply reading an RSS feed. It's super primitive. Like, it's weird how primitive podcasting actually is. It runs literally off of RSS feeds. So that's kind of how it works. But we get all the stats and everything from libsyn.com. So man, Anthony, this is it's been a great year, I think, I have to say, doing the podcast so far. And it's been a lot of fun doing it and collaborating on it with you as well. I want to give one final thanks and shout out to my wife, Sarah, who was super helpful with getting the podcast started in terms of encouraging me, recommending I take an audio format versus video, recognizing that that's a strength of mine. She told me sometimes I can annoy people in person. So that, she took a compliment and turned it into an insult, but that's okay. I get what she was saying. And she also listened to every second of like the first 10 or 15 episodes we did and gave feedback on those as well as a listener. She's a huge podcast fan. So
you guys have your own podcast.
Now we have our own podcast. It's a food podcast, theemptyfork.com. It's on a hiatus. We did like 8 episodes. We've kind of run out of time at the moment to continue that, but I hope to continue it soon. So that's been cool. Like I said, there's a lot more details and stats and screenshots in the post on evolvingseo.com. A lot more lessons learned. I'm sure things I'll be talking about as we go into the future, into the second season. Not that we do seasons, but the second year of Experts in the Wire. For anybody that's tuned in this long, you can head to evolvingseo.com. You can sign up on the email list. I haven't been using it a lot lately, but I hope to revive that soon. You can still sign up, and you can subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, all these places. That really does help us get more visibility in those platforms. It's, I believe, subscriptions that drives that the most, drives the rankings, that is. So, Anthony, I think we're going to wrap that up. That went almost as long as our first try at this yesterday, but you know what? I felt like it was better today. I'm glad we did it.
I think let's just do it again. Let's do it over again. No, man. Yeah, today was good. I like it. I dig it. Happy birthday, Experts on the Wire. Here's to a really awesome second year.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. Later, fans. Later, skaters.
Thank you for being here, everyone. We will see you on the next real episode of Experts on the Wire.